Okay, back at it with some notes. We're on to plants, and then we have some cool labs coming up with plants. So we are in domain Eukarya still, and if you look back on that back wall, we are on our third string, kingdom Plantae. Okay, so let's jump in. So plants, nearly all plants share these three common characteristics. They are multicellular, they are autotrophic, and they have a cell wall. So just like we had She with fungi, now we have Mac with plants. Okay, that might help a couple of you guys help keep this sorted in your head. So all are multicellular, so that means they have more than one cell. All of them are autotrophic, which means they automatically make their own food, so they use the sun to make food. And they have a cell wall. Remember, that's on the outside. It helps them stand upright. So plants are autotrophs, and because of this, we know that they go through photosynthesis. This is the process where they turn carbon dioxide and water into food and oxygen. So we learned about this back in our green notes way back when. Here's that formula again. So remember, carbon dioxide, water, and light combine inside the plant to form sugar and oxygen. We cannot do this. We are heterotrophs. Multicellular, just to review, so cells are organized into tissues, and these tissues do a certain job. So this picture is a slice of a stem of a plant. So you can see there's a couple different parts here. You got these big cells in the middle. You got these ones that kind of look like a piece of pizza. You got these red cells around the outside, these green cells all the way on the outside. Each of those parts of the plant actually do a special job. The tissue does a certain job. So this tissue is responsible for moving food and water. These tissues out here are responsible for keeping the plant upright or standing tall. Recall that plants are enclosed with a cell wall. Remember, that's the outside layer. This surrounds the cell membrane and separates the cell from the outside. So this acts as a little shield, as a little plastic wrap. Okay, you wrap up your food in your fridge with plastic wrap so it doesn't get gross. Same thing here, kind of, is your cell wall keeps all the bad stuff out, keeps all the good stuff in, and it helps the plant stand up straight. Okay, remember that they also have one large central vacuole rather than a bunch of little ones. So us as animals, we have a bunch of vacuoles because we keep food, water, and waste inside of them. Plants only have one big one because mostly it's just going to be holding water for those plants because plants need a lot of water. Okay. Back when evolution was first starting out and plants were the big thing, the popular thing, a lot of plants lived in the water because it was just easier. One, you could float on top of the water, and two, you didn't need to go look for water because it was all around you. But not we, because we're not a plant. Plants decided, hey, we should go live on land because no one else lives up there. It seems kind of cool. So in order to do this, they have to have a couple adaptations. They have to be able to get water, because if they're not floating right on top of it, they have to figure out a way. They have to get other nutrients. Once they have the water, they have to retain it. They have to be able to support their own bodies. Notice the sunflower is standing straight up. And they have to be able to transport materials and reproduce. So there's a lot to do here. Think about it. The roots of the plant are down here. All the nutrients are in the roots, but this leaf way up here needs those nutrients. So it's got to be able to push those nutrients up through the stem into that leaf. So that's going to be one adaptation that plants need in order to live on land. So we're looking at water and nutrients first off. For algae, this is super easy. Okay, they live on land, or they live in water, excuse me. They live in water, so all they have to do is slurp and boom, they got a bunch of water. Okay, because it's all around them. But for land plants, they have to be able to get it from the soil. So in my period 2-3 class, someone's job is always to water the plants. When we do this, we dump that water down into the soil, and the plant uses its roots in order to grab that water. So up top you can see algae. That algae is just floating on top of the water. If it's thirsty, guess what? It gets a drink. And then down here you can see that the roots are what's responsible for grabbing the water for land plants. Retaining water. So once you get all that water, that's awesome. But the sun is very hot, and just like when you lay out in the sun or you go exercise and you start to sweat, you get a little thirsty. Plants get thirsty as well. So they have to be able to keep the water in once they get it. So especially when the air is really dry, like a really hot day or in a desert, water leaves the plant. Think about osmosis. It goes from high to low, and evaporation. So if you've ever kind of touched a leaf, it doesn't feel wet, but you can certainly tell that there is moisture in that leaf. Well, if the sun hits it, it's going to dry up that leaf. So it's got to have some adaptation in order to keep that water in. Okay, because it could otherwise leave the plant dehydrated. Just like you can get dehydrated if you don't drink enough water, plants can also get dehydrated. So they have developed something called a cuticle. And if you've ever gotten a manicure, you know that we have cuticles at the bottom of our fingernails, but it's not the same thing. So a cuticle is a waterproof layer that helps reduce water loss in a plant. So what this guy did here with this leaf is he bent it in half and then he slowly pulled it back. So it's peeling away this layer right here. This triangle is a cuticle. So it's waterproof. So you can see in here it's extra shiny. That's because it's wet. I mean, they're keeping the water in that section of the leaf with this adaptation right here. So plants definitely have cuticles, and they might have a thicker cuticle based on where they live. So in a desert, that cuticle is going to be really, really thick. But here in Virginia, we get a fair amount of rain, especially lately, so the cuticle doesn't need to be nearly as thick. Support. Okay, like I said, one of the adaptations that plants have to think about is, how am I going to stand upright? I think I talked about this before. The taller a plant is, the more sunlight they get. Okay, think about basketball players and getting rebounds. The tallest rebounder, the tallest player, is going to get the ball more easily than the little shorty doo-wop that comes on rolling through. Okay, being tall is good in basketball. Being tall is good for a plant too. So the plant's got to support its own body. It is easier to grow small as a plant. You don't have to have, air quotes, bones. You don't have to have these structures. You can just grow low, and you know what? If you get some sunlight today, cool, I'm going to eat. And if not, cool. Then I'll eat tomorrow maybe. So tall plants, like I said, it's going to be an adaptation. It's going to be a benefit because that increases the amount of sunlight. You can see here in this picture, it doesn't look all that sunny, but you can see right here, there is definitely some sun up there. So all of this moss along this tree trunk, it has to fight to get sunlight, or it has to adapt to live off of very little sunlight. Whereas these big tall trees here, they are getting all the sun because they're super duper close to it. Okay, transporting, and we're going to go way more in depth with this later on, but we're going to preview it right now. So plants need to move stuff, water, minerals, food, from one part of the body to the next. Same with you. Okay, when you eat, I know we've talked about this before, you are a heterotroph, so you put food into your mouth hole. But your feet need food, and your brain needs food, and your butt cheeks need food. So your body has a system to move those nutrients around your body. The nutrients go into your bloodstream, your blood then goes to all of those different places of your body, and every cell gets a little meal every time you eat. Same thing with plants, okay? Water has to go up from the roots. So like I said, my period 2-3 class, they always water my plants. Well, when they pour the water in, it goes into the soil, but the top leaf on that plant still needs water. So the water has to go up from the roots. And opposite, the food has to come down. So the leaves are responsible for making food. So once that happens, the roots still need food, just like my toes need food. So plants have to have a system that gets the sugar from the leaves all the way down into the roots. So here's a nice plant, nice big old tree. Water has to come up. Food has to come down. And if you look in your notes, the bottom of this arrow got cut off. So if you want to pause it and kind of draw that bottom part of the arrow, that was my fault. I didn't catch it. But here's what it needs to look like. Okay, this picture is on page, oh goodness gracious, on page 13. You can see the bottom of the arrow got cut off. So you should just be able to draw that in nicely. Okay, and transporting materials. For low plants, this is super duper easy. Okay, they're nice and low. They don't have to move that water far. They don't have to move that sugar very far. But for tall plants, they have to be more efficient. Okay, they have to have better tubes, better supply, better structures, better systems. So they have what's called vascular tissue. Okay, you have vascular tissue inside of you too. Your heart, your blood vessels, those are all vascular tissue. So a plant doesn't have a heart and a plant doesn't have blood, but a plant does need these vascular tissues in order to move stuff around. So vascular tissue is a system of tube-like structures where materials can move. So you see here we have a couple chopsticks and a couple straws and a rubber band. You can see that the straws are acting like tubes, so the straws will take food down and water up. Okay, so just like your body, my brain needs blood, and so do my toes. So my heart pumps blood into my blood vessels, and then the blood goes all the way down to my toes, all the way up to my brain, and then back into my heart, and it does it all over again. Same thing here in plants, okay? Here's a nice picture. So your heart's in the middle. And you can see in your body, you have these blood vessels all over the place. You got them in your belly, in your fingers, all the way up your neck. Same thing here. This plant has vascular tissue in the roots, in the leaves, in the stem. Okay, so we are very similar to a plant in that regard, in that we have this tube system that moves stuff around in our body. Reproduction, and we're going to talk about this way more later on. Algae, because it's low, can only reproduce if water is around. And I have your little note here. Water is going to move the materials around, so the egg and the sperm. So when it's reproduction season for algae, they're going to release their eggs and release their sperm into the water. The water is going to move around because that's how water does. And then it's going to find an egg, find a sperm, and it's going to make a baby. Tall plants, it's not that easy. Not always water around. So for land plants, they had to adapt or change in order to reproduce in a dry environment. So you can see here this dandelion. Okay, we probably all had one in our backyard. They start as this beautiful yellow flower, and then they get into this white puffball. Well, as a kid, you might walk over and pluck that thing up out of the ground and blow those little white tufts all over the place. All of these things right here are all seeds. So when you pick up that flower and you blow on it to move those seeds around, you are helping the plant reproduce because every one of these is going to turn into a new flower. So land plants really had to get creative, and we're going to talk about all different ways. Some plants shoot them out with a cannon. Some plants have little airplanes. There's actually one plant that makes it look like a paper airplane. It's pretty cool. A lot of plants use the wind. So we're going to talk about that more later on. So from here, you need to go back to Google Classroom or look up on the front board and figure out what you need to do next.